So actually, before we start, I know you wanted to just wait, but I'm going to give you a chance to, make things right, Andrew. And and repent a little here. I know you got something to say about Arcane after doing the needful and rewatching it before the second season. You did a full two season rewatch now in the last week, and I think your feelings have changed a little bit since our episode 2 weeks ago.
Ladies and gentlemen of the All Pop No Culture podcast, I am on my apology tour. 2 weeks ago, I said some very unforgivable, slanderous, um, really just heretical, blasphemous statements about a little show called Arcane, which I now think may be giving Penguin a run for best show of 2024, if not the best show of 2024. I stare directly into the camera because I'm speaking to you, and I hope that these words are piercing into your soul. These words of contrition. This is my story. I'll try to keep it short, but meaningful. So, after finishing season two, as I do on the internet, on Facebook, it's full of memes and and just good moments from Arcane season two. And I paid attention to that. My soul was stirred. So I said, you know what? Let me rewatch season one. And I did. And let me tell you, while season one, in my opinion, still pales in comparison to season two, but it's even the way it ends, it just fades to black after Jinx fires something. Hopefully not too spoilerific. But moments like when Silco said to Jinx, "Don't cry, you're perfect." It hit me. Arcane is meant to be watched in one go. I think that, just because of how much goes into it, there was no way they could have done the whole thing in one go. There's just so much that goes into the art and the music and the creativity of the show. But after I rewatched season one and then watched key moments of season two, including the moment of Isha, I bawled my eyes out. Holy crap. There are so many powerful moments and so many powerful messages in Arcane. And just listening to the music and the diversity of the people who made the music, whether it's Japanese, whether it's soul, whether it's rock, whether it's punk, and all the elements coming together, this is a masterpiece of human innovation and creation. So I hope, again, this monologue of magical manifestation of now I'm just making up words. But the point is, I just want you to know I love Arcane. I think it's a work of art. And I look forward to the next three seasons, which I know are not going to be related to Piltover or at least Vi and goodness, I forget her name, but she has the blue hair.
Jinx.
Uh, no, no, not Jinx, the one that she's into.
Oh,
The
yeah,
Caitlin.
Kate. Yeah.
Vi and Kate. It's going to be amazing. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, all of you from APNC. Thank you, Mike. Mike, you're out there. You told me to watch the show for making me watch it. My girlfriend's watching it now, and it's an amazing show. So please, if you haven't seen it or if you've been somehow misled by my earlier rhetoric, erase all that. See
How,
it.
how do you feel about the pacing of season two now that you rewatched season one? Because I
Ah,
know like
yes,
that was
thank you.
that was
Yes.
still a complaint that it was a little too rushed, but
You just got to be paying attention. For example, season two, when I rewatched it, I there was a character named Salo, and I didn't see what happened to Salo the first time around. The second time around, I saw it, but it's not even like it's kind of like presented in almost like montage fashion. So you have to just be paying attention. It's very dense. So
mm,
I think the pacing was actually right. But it's just that if you blink for a second or turn away or you're bored, you're going to miss details and then be wondering why they go from 0 to 60 in less than 5 minutes. Well, it's because it shows you the increments, but you had to be paying attention.
yeah, I
Is
feel
that
like it's
okay?
it's definitely a show that you have to pay attention to. Not like there's a show called Dark on Netflix that you literally have to watch every second of, or you just don't get it. but it's an incredible show. But Arcane, you will certainly benefit from just putting your phone down and watching for multiple reasons. The story, obviously, but the visuals too. Like it should be the only thing you focus on when you watch it. It's incredible. So, all right, I won't harp on it too long. Just to say that that I'm glad you came around. I still probably put Penguin above it, but I think Penguin was a little more succinct in what it did. Like its story was, well told over the 8 episodes. Not that Arcane isn't, but Arcane's a little more frenetic and all that, and um, Penguin's a little more nuanced. But
Yeah, I just wanted to say I do think Arcane works again for me. Like season two, like the profoundness of episode seven,
mhm.
season two, I think is made more profound by what happens in season one.
Oh
And
yeah,
then when you see the exchange between two characters in season one and how different their exchange is in season one, if you remember the beatdown on the bridge,
hmm
versus what happens in episode seven in season two, which is like a different universe, and you buy them both. And it's just, it's life is about possibilities. And yeah, and there's beauty and imperfection and all that good stuff. Did it bite from Evangelion? 1,000%. Did it even bite a little bit from Spider-Verse? I think with the whole like, the two characters I'm talking about, hell yeah. But you know what? Whatever. Imitations is the most sincere form of flattery. It's about the zeitgeist. But I think that if you copy something, but then put your own spin on it, I can't hate you for that. And that's why I don't hate them for that. I think yeah. Anyways, you get the point. I
Yep.
loved Arcane.
All right. Good. Well, yeah, like I said, I'm glad you could come around, bring you around. And yeah, if somebody's watching and hasn't watched it for some reason, go watch it. It's so good. Like Lauren, I don't know how you feel about animation, but it's worth watching. It really, really is.
It's hit or miss. I'm just reading it now because I'll be honest, the last time you guys brought it up, I logged off for the evening. And but I will look into it. And who knows? Maybe I'll watch it. And
It's
it looks like it's on Netflix, right?
yep, and it's a
Okay.
top 25 rated show on IMDb out of like every TV show ever made. It's top
And
25.
is the only show in IMDb history that every episode of one season was over a nine.
Yep.
So that if that doesn't tell you anything, I don't know what does. It season
Yeah.
two was
It
When did
really
season
is.
one come out?
2021.
Yeah. That was it. Yeah, yeah.
So it was a
It
3 year gap.
and it's because
Gotcha.
they put a significant amount of money into the show. I think I looked the numbers last time. It was 250 million, but for both seasons total. It was like 80, 60, and then a bunch of money into marketing or something like that. But it paid off. This is an example of where if you put the money into marketing and do it well, you can launch something that maybe people, they had to be brought around to, right? Like Arcane is a
Hmm.
story about a game that is very um is very niche. Like it's literally one of the games that professional esports players play, but it has almost no story. So what they did for this show was create an entire story around these characters that have very specific things about them, but they don't have backstories. They don't have all this. So they had the freedom to just go nuts. And so they chose to
Hmm.
create a visual style that is absolutely insane. They cast a phenomenal cast, and it works so well. And um, it's funny because my son started watching. My oldest son's got my wife to start watching it, and they watched the first 3 episodes. And I get home from going to the store or something, and my wife's like, "Yeah, we finished the third episode." And my oldest son is like, "Yeah, but guess who her three favorite characters were?" And it was Vander and then the two kids that died. I was like, fuck. So like she was all upset. She had to watch something else. She had to watch like The Sound of Music just to like get over like but
Good
that's
talent.
what the show does to you. Like especially when you get to season two, there are moments in season two that hurt. So like it's really good.
So this is based on a video game?
Loosely. Like it is for sure. Like all the characters are
Hmm.
either in the video game or um, are around characters that are from the video game. A couple characters from the show were actually added to the video game afterwards.
Mm.
Um, but yeah,
What's the name of the video game?
League of Legends.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it
This is a different world for me, but I mean, we've talked about different
I can tell you it takes zero
pieces.
knowledge of the game because I don't know anything about the game. Andrew doesn't know anything about the game. I learned more about the game when we did our last episode about it, when I had
Hmm.
Wikipedia up and was talking about it, than
Okay.
ever before. So like you
Looks like
don't,
Hercules or something.
yeah, you don't need knowledge of the game. Um, but yeah, it's incredible. It really is. Like I said, the cast is great. Ella Purnell, Haley
Mhm.
Steinfeld, um, are the two
Cool.
mains, but Kevin Alejandro, they're all awesome. So,
Nice.
It was Powder. Powder is the person who got Sloane involved. Obviously,
oh, it
once
should.
she comes,
She's so
then Sloane's
sweet.
like, she's like, nah, I don't know about that character anymore. But
Yeah.
I got Powder was adorable. Like I remember, like I just like, and she's even more adorable for me upon rewatch. I didn't
Hmm.
realize how adorable she actually was. So.
And is
Yeah.
this like curious? Is this definitely for adults only? Is it very like adult theme, or could a child or fa
Mm,
or that?
I think
I would not have children
yes.
watch it. I mean, I
Okay.
think there's at least, oh, well, yeah, there's the whole scene in the,
Goodbye and
yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty adult. It's pretty adult. Now, there's
yeah.
no
Okay.
nudity in it. Like, it's not like there's naked cartoon
Sure.
characters running around, but there is some.
Stuff.
There's one scene that, without actually showing anything, is pretty passionate and graphic, and
Mm,
for what it is, actually incredibly well done. But it's adult for
got it.
sure,
Got it.
um, and it's
Okay.
violent. Like there's certainly
Yeah, it's violent.
deaths, and now not like blood splattering violent, not like
Sure.
a bad horror film, but definitely people fight and people die.
Yeah.
It's ultimately, especially as it gets deeper and deeper into it, it's about war. Um,
Hmm.
and so you'll see that in there. But yeah, it's more of an adult show. Yeah, like you could sit down and watch it with like a 13 to 17-year-old and probably be okay. The couple of sex scenes there are, like I said,
Hmm.
passionate but not graphic. But they definitely aren't hiding what they're doing either. It's not like mom and dad hold hands into the bedroom and then close the door. Like
Right.
it's more than that. But um, yeah, I think anybody over 13 that is a little educated is probably okay with it.
Cool.
If you're hanging out with like a sweet, naive 13-year-old, maybe not. But
Yeah. Not a good
but yeah,
idea. Okay.
it's solid. And there's language. It's got language in it for sure. Um, but yeah, it really is incredible, and the storytelling is amazing. If you can get into, or I guess the thing to remember about it is it's essentially six movies, right? No, four movies.
With
No,
each
six
part.
movies. Yeah, there's three acts in both seasons. They're roughly, if you put them all together, about an hour and a half each. And the way the storytelling works, they really feel like three individual or movies each season, but they immediately tie into each other. So Andrew's right. Like, you're going to get the most out of it if you watch it as close to all at once as you can, because there's so much backstory that improves
You
the
need
story in the second
everything.
season. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
but yeah, the nice thing about it is that you don't need to know anything about it going into it.
Self-contained.
Hmm.
Yeah, it really is. They did a great job with it. So yeah, definitely
Heimerdinger.
recommend.
Tony loves Heimerdinger.
I like
So if you like
Heimerdinger.
cute furry guys,
Yeah,
that's your thing.
yeah, he's adorable. And this is one of those things too, where there's been a few posts about it, and people are like, here's what I would do with my cast if it was going to be live action. And I'm like, that should never, ever, ever happen. There should just never be a live action version of this. Um, what they made was so beautiful and so perfect. Like, if anything you do with it is just going to, harm it. So this belonged as an animated film or series, and it's kind of perfect that way. All right. Well, we will move on from Andrew's tomfoolery And we will move, I don't know, let's start with Joy. Because that is a film you said that's on Netflix?
Just recently came out on Netflix. It is the
And
origin stories and birth of how IVF became to be. So, takes place late 60s into the late 70s, where a trio of professionals come together, a nurse named Jean Purdy, and this is based on a true story. She's played by Thomasin McKenzie, who Kevin and I have spoken about her work on previous episodes. She's definitely up and coming, a New Zealand actress. She plays Jean Purdy, and then who's involved in still like breaking into her career and very young at this time. And then there's Robert Edwards, who's the scientist behind being able to conduct this type of experiment technology to help barren women have a child. And then there's Patrick Steptoe, who's this very well-known surgeon. The three of them together go on this journey to find women who are willing to be really part of this case study in the late 60s, and they get about like 10 to 20 women initially, and they decide, let's figure this out. And I mean, there should be a solution to this problem. And given that this type of procedure is not well received by, let's just say, the state and even by just Christianity in general, they have a lot of challenges to go through, given that people are saying you can't dictate and be God in this case. And even though it's there's a really fine line, I just think it's an interesting time to come out with this type of film, given what just happened within the past couple of months here in America. So nonetheless, uh, it examines just really the trials and tribulations that they have to go through. It takes them almost a decade to actually get this down pat. And the main character is Jean Purdy, who is played by Thomasin McKenzie. And she's really, as a practicing Christian woman, she was definitely between a rock and a hard place, thinking like, am I doing something that, because her mother pretty much pushes her out of the house and out of her life when she realizes that she's working with these two men, and how they're very much so criticized by the greater public at that point, and by media for being evil, for trying to go against Christian ideals and not let God determine whether women get pregnant or not. And they're really just trying to find a solution to a major and wider issue that's becoming more prevalent decades later. A lot of women can't conceive on their own, whether it be on behalf of the woman or even their partner, because as we've come to find over the years, it's not always the woman's, you know, biology why she can't get pregnant. So nonetheless, they finally, after decades, they get it down pat, and they're able to have this man and woman come in that have been trying for a number of years. They've been married, and they finally come up with like the right solution in terms of just how to implant this into this woman where it ends up working. And the reason that it's called Joy is because the couple ends up, and her name is Louise Brown. She's the first ever human who is born via IVF. And they asked the doctors, what should we give the middle name? And they said Joy. So that's how they came up with this film's name. Joy is the middle name to this real life person who's the first baby born via IVF. So overall, it was a good film. I wouldn't say it's like something that has your attention 24/7. It gets 24/7, excuse me, just like from beginning to end, but it's something that I think is an important story, and I think it was well done. It is a little bit slow at times and tough to watch, just especially since Jean Purdy has to go through what she's really passionate about in helping these women, because she is really understanding, and also you come to find that she has her own physical things going on. She reveals that she has had her own troubles over the years, and she knows that she's not going to be able to get pregnant herself. Um, After, I guess, midway through the film or towards the end, she reveals that she has endometriosis, and it's confirmed by the surgeon, Dr. Steptoe, that, yeah, she's someone that most likely will not get pregnant. So I think, given her own physical stuff that's going on, she is even more so determined in helping. And as someone who is a nurse and is caring and also is able to resonate with some of the issues that these women are going through, she wants to help, but also just that back of her mind, I'm a Christian woman. Am I doing the right thing? So you have that like internal battle that she's going through throughout this time, and of course, like her mother shutting her out as well. So overall, pretty good film, but yeah, I will say it's just topical now, given what's going on politically and just some things that are being discussed in the media about IVF. But it truly is it's given, I think it said at the end of the film, there's been hundreds of thousands of babies that have been born as a result of the work that these three people have done since the late 70s.
That's Yeah, that's really cool. I like the cast. Thomas and Mackenzie is she's up and coming. She's getting better. She was the daughter in Old
Hmm.
that had the baby and that was instantly dead.
No, she
Um,
was the sister.
yeah. Oh, she w she wasn't the one that got pregnant.
No, she's the sister.
No, because the one that got pregnant climbs up and then falls off, right? She tries
Hmm.
to escape and then dies. That's right. She's the sister that stays behind. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, she was an old
Eileen.
she's in a show that is doing pretty well on Netflix, another animated show called Pantheon, that I haven't watched yet, but I've heard at
Hmm.
least that it's a solid show.
He was also in Jojo Rabbit. That's what
Yep,
I
Yes.
remember.
that's
Yes.
where she got
And
started.
She was the girl
yeah.
on the wall, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So she's up and coming. James Norton, I've seen him in some other stuff. He's the guy
Yeah.
that played Bob Edwards, and then Bill Nighy is a British actor that is usually at least a little funny, and so it's good to see him be dramatic. I've always found that I think comedians that decide to do drama are better than dramatic actors that try to do comedy. There's a talent to it that is harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
Um, and he's great though. I like Bill Nye, so to see him in something is always cool. Um, I'll have to look up Rotten Tomatoes, but IMDb it's a 7.1, so it's looking like it's pretty solid.
Yeah. On Rotten Tomatoes, 89 from the critics and 88 from the audience. So pretty
Okay,
equal there
yeah,
and well received across the board. It's not a movie that I'm like gonna recommend to everybody, and it's something I think it's for a very specific type of person. If you're into, you know, real life events or just based on science and stuff, I
I
think
was
it's
gonna
cool.
say, is this more about the people and what they go through, or does it deal with the science of it a lot also?
It's more about the people and what they grow
Okay,
through, but it's also just how there was a lot of trial and error at the very beginning. I mean, the first couple women that got pregnant ended up losing the child early on in the process, so that was really frustrating
yeah,
because here they are, they're trying to instill hope in these individuals who are desperately wanting a child. I think like the first woman had an ectopic pregnancy,
ectopic,
yeah,
yeah, when it's in the
ectopic,
yeah.
yeah, in the fallopian tube, yeah. So that was frustrating. And the other woman, I forgot what happened, but they had like 10 to 12 women, I think, in like the first trial. And Jean Purdy gets very close to these women too, because I mean, they're all like monitored from like a health standpoint. Their cycles are monitored. It's a very intense process in general. I know to this day, it's one of those things where I think women have to prepare a couple of weeks for to
Oh
even
yeah,
go
yeah. At
through the
least yeah,
process.
there's a lot of injections and all kinds of stuff they can go through, and it's still not a perfect process. So to be at the
Exactly.
forefront of it would have been hard, especially if you start to get your hopes up. when it's new and
Right.
almost guaranteed to fail, versus now where there's a little more hope.
Right. And it took some time to even get like the right combination of things. I think just they were realizing the way that they were, I don't want to say it's a mixture, but what they were doing in that test tube wasn't working until finally 78, where they're like, this is what we have to do, and this is how we do it for specific type of women based on, I guess, their own needs, et cetera. Andrew, sorry, you were about to say something.
Yeah, I don't know much about it, but I heard it was expensive. But then I looked it up and it said 15 grand to 30 grand or more for a single cycle. So I don't know if that's considered expensive in like I don't know. I've
It
never
is
tried it.
considering it's not covered by insurance.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
So when you
Yeah.
go to do it, it's you're paying that full 15 grand and you've got to come up with that money. Um, so like I have a former coworker who they struggled for whatever reason. They went and they did IVF. Um, didn't work, did work. They have a beautiful child now. They had a couple left, so they want to try a couple more times because they had that initial investment and they could. Those ones didn't work, and now they're done. But at the same time, like they can look at this and say, yes, there were these things that didn't work, but we got this kid that is great. And, so they didn't get everything they wanted, right? But that's number one. I mean, that's pregnancy anyways, right? Like it can go wrong. So it's not a perfect thing. And so yes, they had to like literally sit down and calculate so much crap every time they wanted to try. And it's just, yeah, it's hard. And so, if you think about a 15 to $30,000 investment that you may get nothing out of, that's the
Right.
hard part too.
And you don't get your
Um,
money back for that. Like you're done. That's it.
yeah, one
I
of my
know.
one of my previous coworkers, I think they actually did spend the money and none of them like they couldn't get anything viable. They ended up adopting, and that worked for them. Like they they had a kid before, and then they their second one was the adopted kid, and he was awesome and fit in perfect. But you just don't know, and it's yeah, that I think that's where the real expense comes in is in the fact that it's still a gamble, right? There's
Yeah.
no guarantee.
So it's like there's two layers to this. The first layer is just, the biological layer, like, the biological bad luck, whether it's the man or the woman. That's one layer that which I'm
Sure.
sure the movie
Mhm.
dealt with. But there's a second layer, which is the class layer. So, I feel like having the means to even struggle with IVF in a way is kind of like, well, at least you can have the means. So there's like two layers to this whole situation. So
But it wasn't discussed when it came to means because it was just a trial
no,
Mhm.
in
right. No,
the
that I get.
movie.
I get.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, but talking about the
Down
relevance,
the line. Yeah.
it's like, it's absolutely still, like, why isn't it insured? Like, for example. So, yeah, no, it's a very, I think, serious topic, no
Well,
matter.
it's the same thing with like egg freezing. I know I spoke about this a couple months ago when I saw the film Scrambled and reviewed that
Mhm.
here. Very few companies will cover egg freezing
Yeah.
Yep.
in general. And it's interesting, more and more companies are, debating whether or not to add this because a lot of longevity is determined by the benefits and long-term health and well-being of your employees. So I think it's something that's becoming more prevalent. And I think hopefully over time, because even just egg freezing, like it's like you're paying a rent for these eggs every year.
Yeah.
It's an added expense.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's to a degree, like I understand why some of these things are expensive. There's a lot of work that goes into it on the back end, but at the same time, it just feels, almost so unfair because the people that want to have kids are having such a hard time having kids, but people that don't want to have kids, oftentimes it's easy for them, and it's like this crappy trade-off. I mean, the nice thing is that a lot of people that don't want to have kids and end up getting pregnant and going through with it find that they love being a parent. Like it certainly happens. Like I know um, before my kids were born, my wife wasn't excited about being a parent. She didn't like kids at all, and she obviously loves her kids. So it just sometimes it's a mentality changer, but yeah, it's always hard to see the people that want it so bad, um, that have to struggle with it.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. Yeah, that'll be a good watch for anybody that's interested in the subject. Um, I'm curious about the science of it. If it's not the main focus, I might not
Not the
be
main
quite
focus.
as interested, but
They touch upon it, but it's not the main focus. But I know a lot of people might be interested. Okay, why did it not work the first time? They
mhm,
go into somewhat of an explanation without too many details of
yeah.
either the chemicals that are used or just how they actually implant it, more or less.
Mhm,
But yeah, I mean, it took 10 years and not until Jean Purdy's mother died was she actually like, all right, I'm mentally able to, because here's her mother who shut her out of her life and thought she was doing like the job of the devil here. And then finally, when her mother passed, it's like, this is what I'm meant to do and how I'm supposed to change lives and make my contribution to the world. And I think she had a clear conscience and more meaning after her mother passed away to actually go back to the drawing board and continue doing this work. And both the doctors, Dr. Steptoe and the scientist, Mr. I guess Edwards, but he's still alive, I believe, too. And they talk at the end of the film about the plaque that they have in England. So this all takes place like outside of Manchester, by the way. When this all, yeah, Robert Edwards, he has all three of them on that plaque, and apparently it took some time to get Jean Purdy's name on it because, women in medicine or just women in general being acknowledged for their contributions. I mean, he even said this would have never happened if Jean wasn't a part of the team. So, yeah, and the three of them all equally in their own way contributed to making this happen and possible. And then, of course, other countries started being able to share and have this process take place. I mean, I have a cousin who was born via IVF, and that was in the early 90s. So it clearly, and like you said before, Kevin, even to this day, just because they have it down pat doesn't mean like they're gonna immediately someone's gonna do IVF and then they're gonna produce a child. It may take a couple of cycles. I know people that have shared with me that either they know someone or they individually had them and their significant other took three, four, five times.
mhm.
They try to get as many eggs as possible, and they even show like just being able to obtain eggs. And if you just have like a bad batch of eggs, like you're shit out of luck.
Yeah, and
Or
that's on
even if
you.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
and that's on
There's
you.
no money back guarantee, you know?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's definitely not, a procedure that any of us should. I don't want to say, I don't think anyone like actually is like, yeah, I'm excited to go through with this, but it's like one of those things where it gives someone possibility and just really hope to actually produce a child and bring a child into this world. So, yeah,
Cool. Well, then we will go from medical drama to I guess is it a documentary, Andrew? Your yacht rock journey today?
Yeah, my yacht rock journey. And I know, believe it or not, selfishly, I can go into that, but I'm kind of curious about that guy standing behind you. Yeah.
Um yeah, so Superman and Lois, he's back here. Um came to an end this last week after 4 seasons. There's a lot of rumors around why the show ended. Some of it has to do with James Gunn and his Superman coming out. I don't necessarily doubt that. I kind of wish they had let it run a little longer. But you can definitely tell, like, if you watch, you can see where they started to have to be more careful with their budget. Like, the budget was getting cut back season by season. I think the fourth season had the lowest budget, which actually, if you watch it, is impressive to know because it looks great. The show itself takes place later in Superman's life, so he has been married to Lois for a while. They have two teenage sons, and his mother is sick, so they move back to Smallville to take care of the farm. She passes away, and they keep the farm and decide to stay. And so the bulk of the show takes place in Smallville, where he's now trying to replace, or not replace, to raise his kids, kind of the way he was raised. And as the show starts off, his kids don't have any powers. They're just regular teenagers. One's a little more introverted and kind of nerdy, and one's a football player, jock, like everything. They're fraternal twins. Um, and uh, and so as the show goes on, uh, everybody assumes that if one of them is going to get powers, it's going to be the jock, the jock one, because he's already got like that mentality and all that. But his kids, so the other thing is his kids don't know. His kids, even at 15, 16, however old they are, don't know that he's Superman. So that's one of the things that happens early in the show is he finally reveals to his kids that he's Superman. Um, then the the more odd, I think they even kind of suggest that he's mildly autistic in the first season. I feel like that goes away later in the show, but they kind of talk about it early in the season. That one actually starts to get powers. And so, he's got to learn that. The other one doesn't. So you've got it's a CW show, so you have family and kind of teenish drama in there, right? Like you always do. So there's certainly family drama. You have Lana Lang still lives in Smallville, who is Superman's first love, or Clark Kent's first love, and she's played by Emmanuelle Shrieky, who has been around for a long time. She was in Entourage a lot. I discovered her in a movie like a billion years ago called 100 Girls, and I thought she was one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen in my life. And now, 20 years later, she still is. Like, she's gorgeous. And in the series finale, she ends up getting married. That's one of the things that happens in the series finale. And I mean, she looks incredible, but she looks like, she looks like a 40 something beautiful woman. Like, she grew up, but she's still really pretty. And so
She's in Snow Day.
I'm
She's the
sure,
hot
you
girl
know what? That makes
in Snow
perfect
Day.
sense. That makes perfect sense. That's right around the same time as 100 Girls, I think. When was Snow Day? Uh,
2000.
yeah, yeah. I
That's
think
one of
100
my
Girls was like
favorites
2001.
as a kid. Yeah,
Yeah,
she's Claire, like the hot. Anyway, continue.
yeah. No, she's gorgeous. Like, she's one of those people that you're just like, she's a very pretty person. Um, but Superman is played by Tyler Hoechlin, and so one of the things that happened was this show was created, yeah, yeah, from Teen Wolf, right? He was in Teen Wolf, yeah. Um, but
Just another person I have a huge crush on. Continue.
he he was cast in this part while Henry Cavill was still playing Superman in the films, and people were like, "Nah." They're like, "This guy is not. There's no way this guy is Superman or whatever." So he got cast to show up in Supergirl, and he makes his first appearance in there. And I knew from that appearance that he was a great casting for Superman, or at least the way that they were working his character was perfect, because there is, like, Henry Cavill's Superman is a fine Superman. I actually really enjoy Man of Steel. I like Henry Cavill as Superman. I think they kind of botched his character in a few ways in Snyderverse, but whatever. Um, but I thought he was fine. Like, I liked Henry Cavill a lot. But he was kind of big and angrier, and just kind of a little a little darker, and that has a lot to do with the tone of what they were trying to make. But this, in Tyler Hoechlin's first appearance, he saves a kid, turns around and like just gives the kid like a shit-eaten grin, like he's just so happy to have helped, and then flies off. And so you have this feeling of a superhero that just loves to be a hero and help people. And that's kind of, Superman's thing before before America kind of went a little sour. His original catchphrase was truth, justice, and the American way. And now it's like truth, justice, and a better tomorrow is what they say now, because they're a little, we're not so widely loved as we used to be around the world. But yeah, so he just embodied this character in a way that was so like genuine and charming and just kind. And then you have him as a parent, as Clark Kent now raising kids, and he's a guy that wants to be a good dad, but also protect his kids from all the things that he is and the things that being himself brings into your world if you know who he is, right? And so there's some moments as the show goes on, where he really has to fight with the fact that if people knew who he was, his family would be in so much danger, right? Um, Lois Lane is played by Bitsy Tulloch, who has been around also. She was in Grimm. If you ever watched Grimm, she was one of the main characters in that, which was another really sweet moment because she stayed very close with the guy that played the main character in Grimm. So in the series finale of Lois and Superman and Lois, they do a time jump forward. So their kids are grown up now. And the guy that played Grimm plays one of her sons just for like 5 minutes of screen time. But you could tell that they stayed close enough that when they were casting this part, she's like, "Hey, let's get my buddy in here and do this." So that's a really sweet moment too. But she is fantastic as Lois Lane. A lot of this show was about um, how strong she is as a woman and a mother, and a wife, and everything that she had to be, without making her a weaker character, right? Like not making her, um, have to take a step back in any way. Like she is certainly, it's called Superman and Lois, and she is a very main, very strong character in this, and all the way through. And so, in season 3, I think it is, she deals with cancer, and she gets really sick, and they just the way the show deals with that is fantastic. The two teenage sons are really great. The kind of jock son, Jonathan Kent, was replaced about halfway through because the kid playing his part, just I don't remember exactly what happened, and I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I think he was just stressed out. He just didn't want to hang with it, and I loved him. I thought he was great. They brought in this other kid, and I was like, I don't know, I don't, we'll see what happens or whatever. He did a great job too, and by the end, he kind of forgot that it was a replacement. But the first kid, Jordan Elsis, I was sad to see him go because I thought he really was doing a great job. But he had to leave for whatever reason he had to leave, and you got to respect that. And I think what was really nice too is it seemed like the community at large kind of accepted that and were like very good to him when he left, and very good to the kid that came in and took over. Um, and so, they were really great. So many great other cast members in this. But to get to the last season and then the finale, the last season is a lot of Superman versus Lex and Superman versus Doomsday. They took these big things and they took some big swings in the last season because they knew it was their last season, which is really nice. I always love when a show knows that it's ending because you can button things up the way you want to, or at least as close as you can. Um, the whole Doomsday thing was done amazingly to the point where they kill Superman. So Doomsday kills Superman. In this season, they managed to bring Superman back in a really emotional way. Like it was really cool. Um, so he comes back. He comes back weaker. So as opposed to the comics, when Superman died and came back, he was ultimately stronger when he came back. Um, this Superman was now a lot more mortal than he's ever been. And so you have to deal with that. And then Doomsday comes back. And when he ultimately defeats Doomsday, they do a good job of actually making you feel sympathetic for Doomsday at the end. So when he's like it's great. And the way they create Doomsday was really interesting. Ultimately, a creation in a way of Lex Luthor's. Like Lex creates Doomsday, not in the way that he did in the movie. And it's certainly not comic accurate. Doomsday was an experiment on Krypton that went sideways, but um, it worked in the show, and that was great. And then Doomsday was played by Michael Cudlitz, who is a fantastic dramatic actor. He was in the show Southland, which was a show about LA cops, which is probably one of the most, or at least felt like one of the grittiest, most accurate depictions of cop shows. And Michael Cudlitz is awesome. And so when they cast him as Lex, I was like, cool, but like he's like a bigger guy. Like Lex to me is usually a little leaner. But he went bald. He had a goatee for a while for the character and all that, but he was a very angry version of Lex. And one of the reasons behind that is that Lois put him in jail or wrote an article that had him end up in jail. And as it turned out, the crime that he was charged with and went to jail for, he didn't actually commit. So when he comes out, despite the fact that he committed a billion other crimes that he should have been caught for, and he knows it, he has a huge grudge against Lois Lane, not Superman. And so he's coming after her and her family. And then ultimately in the finale has a showdown with Superman, which, as you can imagine, Superman's going to win. This is the finale, right? The series finale. What was really cool is this last episode had him face off against Doomsday and Lex in the same episode. They managed to do it in half of the episode and still make it good, still make both of those fights work and make them good, which is impressive in its own way. Which left the last half of the show to be this absolutely beautiful, wonderful, emotional send off to the show, to all of the characters. Like every character has like this nice, like closing moment. They go through these things and then they have their flash forward. So you get to see his kids grow up. But because of the things he went through this season, you also see Superman age, which you never see in the comics. There's a lot of comics where he lives for hundreds of years, if not more, because he just doesn't age. But here, he essentially ages along with Lois. And so, they raise their kids, they get to see their grandkids, they do all this stuff. Lois gets cancer again and loses, and that's a whole emotional thing. Um, and then, Clark's left on his own. At some point in this second half, he talks about realizing that he can't do the superhero thing on his own. And they have this cool montage where he's in the middle, but then his sons come in and they're in costume. And then the guy that played John Henry Irons comes in, who is Steel from the comics, and they put him in his comic accurate Steel costume, which looks amazing, but you actually don't really get to see it. So there's some cool like set photos that show him in it standing up that look great, and then his daughter is flying with them. So now you have like a super team kind of covering the world. And then Lois gets cancer and she passes away. And so he adopts a dog, which he names Crypto. It's just a dog, but they managed to sneak the name Crypto in, which is great. And then at the end, he passes away. So the show ends with him passing away, and you have this moment of him kind of walking through his house and kind of, it's him walking towards the light, right? Like that's his thing. And he gets to see his kids again. He gets to see, I would say kind of sort of say goodbye to everybody in their own way. There's a moment where Lex is there in this, moment of the afterlife. Lex is sitting at a table, super angry, and Clark sits down with him for a minute, kind of puts his hand on his shoulder, essentially, forgiving him for the things that he did because, they're they're in the afterlife now. And in the very last moment, he walks out onto the patio, and there's Lois in a red dress, looking beautiful. They have a kiss and a little dance, and then credits roll, and it was really good. Like it is an emotional ending to the show. I wouldn't say like it's Arcane level finale emotional, but it really was. And all these things they did over 4 years and built up really, really worked. And one of the things that has always been impressive about the show, and what's really impressive about this fourth season, is that they never had much of a budget. And so to see the budget get cut, one of the things they had to do to make this last season work was take a lot of the regular characters, squeeze them into smaller parts, but they were no longer main characters in the show. Um, and so the budget, tightened, and they still managed to make it look great. And Doomsday is like the closest to the comics look of Doomsday that they've ever had, and he was really good. So it was just a really good show. It's really kind of neat to see that DC TV shows on the CW started with Smallville and ended with Superman and Lois. So you had young Clark and old Clark and dead Clark and all that, and had this storyline. Really, it's not the same storyline. Like they're not the same versions of those characters, but still to kind of see this thing go from beginning to end. And it's really, really good. Now it's not, again, it's not Arcane level good. Like if you look this thing up on IMDb, I would bet a lot of the episodes are sevens or eights, and that's fine. It's certainly a CW show in a lot of ways. There's a lot of things that aren't as mature as some other things, but they really did deal, like the cancer thing was done so well and so emotionally, and the relationship between Lois and Clark was incredible. And then like for me, watching this whole show, Tyler Hoechlin is my Superman. Like I've always put Christopher Reeve up here, and he probably still is, but maybe that's more nostalgia. But he was always amazing. But Tyler Hoechlin's like here, like he was incredible, and I kind of don't have him compete with Tom Welling because to me, Tom Welling was always Clark. Like he did some heroic things, but he was still learning his way. Like he wasn't really Superman; he was always Clark, and he was young. And I think, Michael Rosenbaum, I think he will always be the best Lex to me, but he got 7 seasons to develop that character in a way that nobody else ever will, I don't think. And and that made him incredible. Plus, he's a great actor and did a great job. But this version of Lex works in a way that I almost feel like they wanted Jesse Eisenberg's character to work, but that was too ridiculous. Like he was kind of silly angry, and here he's just mad. Like he is an angry dude that will wreck shop to take down Lois and then ultimately Superman and everyone involved. And he's really good. When they bring in John Henry Irons, who in the comics was a big deal because when Superman died in the comics, John Henry Irons became Steel, but he was a black Superman in, what was it, 1991,
Wait, no,
89?
no, that it was not. But the Death of Superman, I'm pretty sure it was 93. But I mean, I remember that because it was so traumatizing. But
Yeah.
now I'm gonna triple check it. But yeah, I want to say it was 93.
But yeah, John Henry Irons. So, he actually has a really interesting first appearance in the show. He comes from an alternate universe where Superman was evil. And so when he gets transferred to this universe, the first thing he wants to do is kill Superman because he thinks he's protecting the world. And so for him to ultimately become friends with Superman and all that is great. Um,
December 92 until October 93. So we were in the same era.
we were there. We were close enough. Um, and yeah, it really is a really well done show. Again, if you look at it through the lens of something that was created on the CW, you definitely have some more um like slightly over dramatic family drama and teen drama and stuff like that. But really, when you get to the heart of it, when you get to the relationship between Superman and Lois, and then Lex, and even Lana and her relationship with them is great too. Um, it's a really fantastic show, and I definitely recommend it to anybody that enjoys Superman. I don't think this isn't like Arcane or The Last of Us or something where you can be like, you have to watch the show, or The Penguin. You have to watch the show. I think there has to be at least a little bit of love for this character to really watch it and enjoy it. But if you've got that, I think you'll really like it. So
Well, Shy, I know that you hit me up. You're a viewer. You wanted to make sure that we covered this show, and I hope that was good. Uh, I was curious. I'm also just very much now self-conscious about my dang internet, but hopefully there's not too many choppy situations going on here. But thank you for that. I think I might just watch the last episode anyway, just to like, I know you're probably like, no, Andrew, you gotta watch the whole thing. But no, no, no. Let me just watch this finale because I have enough backstory to like kind of appreciate the moments. But
I'm
you look,
curious.
yeah,
I just want to see how many episodes were in season four, and what they were, because you might be better
approaching,
off.
yeah.
There's 10 episodes in season four. So I mean, if you
What?
watched all of season four,
Okay.
um, you'd
I was
probably get
thinking,
enough. there's some really good stuff in season four that I thought was really great. Actually, every episode is at least a 7.5 in season four, with the finale being a 9.6 on IMDb. Um, and there's a couple of nines in there for the final season, which is pretty impressive actually for a CW show. So um, it it works. I think Lex is introduced in season three, but you'll get enough out of him, and I think maybe even watch like the last two episodes of season three, because that's when Doomsday comes out and ultimately kills Superman. Because I think season three ended on the cliffhanger of Superman dying, which was you're just like, what? So yeah, it's really it's a good show for sure. So
All right. Well, I hope I don't like change things up, but like since this is a DC show, yeah, actually I'll change things up. Otherwise, Lauren's gonna like die here. So, all right, we're not gonna do Commandos. We're gonna do the Yacht Rock documentary.
all righty.
So, on Max, which is actually like lately, I think been a streaming platform that has a lot of stuff that I'm watching. Like, good for Max. Like,
Yeah,
I really, you've made me forget HBO. It's like it's Max now. It's cool.
I think it's
In my
going back to HBO though.
what's that? Is it?
I think so.
No way.
I think they are.
Huh. Well, you know what? Whatever. I think it was kind of a mistake to go just to Max, but I forgot. But either way, whatever. Whatever y'all are doing, it's good. So in my feed, everyone's talking about this Yacht Rock documentary, and I decided to watch it because I'm big on Buzz, and
What's the name of it?
I loved it. The name of it is, hold on, just Yacht Rock, a documentary, but it's doc with DOCK because obviously like doc, yacht, that kind of thing. Yacht Rock, a documentary. And basically, it's about a genre of music that wasn't even named until like maybe 20 years after it happened. So it's like your late 70s, early 80s LA scene based collective of music where they describe Steely Dan as like the primordial ooze. But then you had folks like a lot of session singers who ended up becoming Toto. And then you got a guy named Michael McDonald, who was part of the Doobie Brothers. And then you had Kenny Loggins. Before he became movie soundtrack guy, he was making a lot of this music.
Hmm.
So the best way to describe it would be it was like soft rock, but it had like a lot of influence from like R&B, soul, and jazz. And it ended up becoming this very kind of pleasant. Oh, Christopher Cross, he did Sailing. So it became this very pleasant, almost I heard it described as like dentist office music back in like maybe 2002, 2003. But apparently this internet like comedy troupe came up with the term yacht rock because they were kind of lampooning like all these characters from LA. The way I loved it, I ate it up. The reason why I ate it up is because I'm big on genres of music. So as some of you may know, like I created a website called New Jack NJS Forever, New Jack Swing Forever, because it was about identifying something that was more than just a collection of artists. It was actually a movement. And like New Jack Swing, I think this yacht rock thing was a movement. Was it called yacht rock at the time? Like I said, no, but it was definitely a moment. So basically Steely Dan, it was two guys, Donald Fagen, and I forget the other guy's name. I feel terrible for saying this, but I know Donald Fagen because I'll just get right to the point. Towards the end of the documentary, you hear all these different folks talking about their participation in the movement. So then they finally are like, well, what does Donald Fagen think about this? That he was like part of the foundation. And then he literally says after saying, was hoping to talk about Yacht Rock. It's like phone call audio. And then Donald Fagen just goes, why don't you go fuck yourself? Click. So that just tells you how much he just hated the term. But it was really funny, as a rocker. But anyway, Steely Dan is really respected, I think, for a lot of music people. But going back to setting the scene, New York is, I think, more of a raw place like London, where you had pop. I mean, not pop. You had punk, you had hip hop, you had more just kind of like rough music. Los Angeles is where you go to enjoy the good life. It is where, even Motown went from Detroit, which was more, like soul and gritty, to LA, where you had songs like Rhythm of the Night by DeBarge. So there was a bit of a smoothing out and more of a popification, if you will, of the music. So that said, so much cool pop music was coming out of LA that a lot of the guys who ended up becoming Toto were a high school band, but they got really good at being session musicians. So these are guys who could play their instruments so well that when someone needed a recording, they'd go call them and recruit them to make, to work on the records. And they all were working on the same records. I think at one point, I think one guy said he worked on 2,000 records between that time frame because he was so known for being good. And also just to breadcrumb, a lot of these guys worked on Thriller. So basically, Quincy Jones went and said, "Hey, I want you, Steve Porcaro. I want you, Jeff Porcaro. I want you, to come in." And the song "Human Nature" by Michael Jackson was a demo by Steve Porcaro. He wanted to make that song and put it on the album, and they were becoming more of a stadium rock band at that point. So it's like that song's a little too soft for us. So when Quincy heard it, he was like, "Oh my God, done." So it's Steve Porcaro's song, but of course Mike blesses it with his voice and his vocals, and it's actually my favorite Michael Jackson song of all time. Michael McDonald, awesome dude. Like he basically looks like Kenny Rogers, but he
Hmm.
has the voice of like James Ingram. He sounds very soulful.
Hmm.
So the song that you probably know is Lauren. If you know a song called "Regulators" by Warren G. Anyways, you know the beat. I'm sure you do. Anyway,
Okay.
so Michael McDonald's original song was called "I Keep Forgetting," and that's the beat. And it became the bed for Regulators, for example. But he also does a lot of background vocals, and you could just tell he was a very humble dude, but just was really good. He joined a group called the Doobie Brothers. I feel like I'm rambling now, but I gotta say Michael McDonald is great. Christopher Cross, "Sailing." So NSYNC actually covered that song, and it's a great song. But Christopher Cross, he was a freshman guy. He was just like, I think, from Austin, Texas. He sent his demo to the wrong people. If the A&R folks at the record company had gotten it, they would have ignored it, right? But he sent it to the wrong guy, but the wrong guy knew the right person to actually say, "Hey, this is a great demo. You got to hear it." And he ended up getting signed, made an album. He won 4 Grammys, I think, like best single, best new artist, best album, and I think something else. And it was just like, and it even showed like Barbara Streisand's face, like she was upset because he was like beating out everyone for like his award. What's crazy though is Christopher Cross is a very normal looking dude, and he was never able to really replicate like his success. And a lot of that had to do with the onset of MTV, because this is like 77 to
Hmm.
about 81, 82. So once MTV came into the picture, they talk about how video really did kill the radio star. And it was like, a lot of these artists were just regular dudes who didn't really have a look, and they were focused on the music. But when you had, and they name drop Michael, Madonna, and Prince, who were just as captivating visually as they were musically, a lot of these yacht rockers just kind of couldn't keep up. Michael did, Michael McDonald. But even by 85, 86, that's when his career was done. Kenny Loggins, on the other hand, had a lot of these guys were also blue-eyed soul. I talked about how this yacht rock had jazz and soul infused into it. So before it was called yacht rock, I mean, a lot of like, I just say it, black music stations played a lot of this music because, frankly, back in the early 2000s, I used to work at this station called KBLX in the Bay Area, and it was called like Smooth and Warm Quiet Storm. That was kind of the thing. And while they play things like, the Isley Brothers or whatever from the 60s and 70s and 80s, but really 70s and 80s, a lot of the yacht rock stuff was there too. So Boz Scaggs, oh my God, a lot of, if there's any parents in listening to this podcast right now, you guys are going to know who I'm talking about. Like, I just considered that like R&B. It was just basically like that's what it was. But back then, there was a lot of more cross-pollination and less like kind of like you could have Stevie Wonder and like uh um Toto or so, like, all on the same bill back then. It was just nice, groovy music. Now, Toto's biggest hit was called Africa. And I think one funny part of the documentary was that was the song that none of them were like, "This song sucks." And it was like their only number one hit. Like it's crazy. I love how sometimes in life, the thing that you are absolutely the least confident or like about ends up being like your dope as shit. Like I love stories like that because I think that life is what happens when you're busy making other plans, as they say. I gotta finally mention Kenny Loggins, my boy. So Kenny Loggins made a song called "This Is It." And that's one of my earliest childhood memories. It was so smooth and silky, like Michael Jackson, actually. I loved that song as a 4-year-old. And so when I was moving from New York to Vegas, that song just came back. It's like, this is it, because it's literally like this major life decision. I'm like packing everything, I'm getting rid of things. And then that final day where it's like, okay, like it's all in the moving truck. There's nothing left. My apartment's empty. And I'm on that car ride to the airport, flying out for the last time. It's like, this is it. Dun, 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 dun. You make no mistakes where you are. Anyway, it's a great, great documentary, and I hope that this, monologue wasn't completely, what's the word, interrupted by damn internet issues. But it was not that long. It's only about I want an hour and 30 minutes, maybe tops. There's definitely stuff that I missed, but I think overall. Oh, I forgot one more thing. They also have interviews with current artists. So there's a guy named Thundercat who is like more of like 2017, 2018 kind of guy. And he talks about a song that he did with Kenny Loggins and Michael McDonald. And it's so good. When I Shazammed it on my phone, I realized I Shazammed it just out and about like years ago. So that's number one. Uh, and number two, it's gone. So anyhow, this is an amazing documentary. I highly recommend it. Questlove from The Roots talks about it a lot. And I think it's just great to get the backstories from people who were there versus the people who came afterwards and talked about the significance of the music. So, do I think Yacht Rock is a good name? Actually, no. I think it's a little too limiting. I think, I mean, we'll have to settle for it, but I think at the end of the day, it was just a magical moment where musicianship was really, really important, but it also had a pop sensibility. And the last thing also, I keep saying last thing I'll say is that Kenny Loggins was smart when he realized that like the movement was ending. That's when he transitions to a song on Caddyshack. I'm all right. Yeah, that's it. Caddyshack, then Danger Zone for Top
Hmm.
Gun, and then I think something else, and then so he was able to keep doing his thing. So I hated it clearly by how excited I was talking about
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, and it's funny because like the more artists you named, and the more like I was like, oh shit, yeah, okay, like a lot of people that I've heard of and know the music of, but I've heard the term yacht rock, but I don't know where the genre falls in or who falls into the genre. So like as you started listing them off, like they all made sense to me, like in that genre. So like I get it. Um, but yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun, if nothing else, and very informative. Like if you've got Quincy Jones, if you're talking about Quincy Jones, if you're talking about Questlove and them talking about, you know, certainly this genre of music inspired people afterwards. Um, it's funny. It really is funny how a band can hate their song, like Toto could hate their song, but Africa still plays and shit all the time. Like you still hear Africa all the time, and I I cannot name another song by Toto. You know,
Oh, there's a great song by Toto. It's called Georgie Porgy, and that song is so R&B. If you heard it, you'd think it was a
no,
black group. It's a late 70s group. MC Light sampled it for a song
okay.
called For Georgie in 92. But yeah, a lot of that stuff, like if you find like a soul station, I think KB no, yeah, you're anyway, there's a station called WBLS in New York. Now, before your time, Lauren, but because I think now they're more hip hop if they're still around. But back in like the 80s or whatever, WBLS was more this era. So yeah, to play Africa versus Georgie Porgy, like you would be like, how is this the same group? But it's like they were Blue-Eyed Soul. That's what I'll say. It was Blue-Eyed Soul. I think
Well,
these rockers were Blue-Eyed Soul.
oh, and that's Michael McDonald. Like
Yes.
I guarantee you, it's like Elvis Presley. People were listening to Michael McDonald and thought he was a black man. I guarantee it. And he looks like Santa Claus. Like
Yes. Yeah. But you can tell he's a
he's
cool guy. Like I
yeah.
love his energy. He's a cool guy.
So all right, cool. Yeah, I'll have to give it a watch just for the sake of catching up on the music and everything.
Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of fun. So I will go back then to Lauren, who will take us to something that looking at sounds like maybe it's a little less joyful, but Three Women.
Yeah,
It's a series, right? Like a
it's a series on Stars that I started around Thanksgiving. I really like Shailene Woodley's work, and I saw that this was released earlier this year, like January, February, and it's based on a true story and the book by Lisa Taddeo, which came out in 2019. I believe it was like a pretty popular book, maybe even a bestseller, also by the same name, Three Women. And this takes place, I believe, like within the past 10, 15 years, where this struggling writer based in New York, she's originally from New Jersey, Lisa Taddeo, is trying to, or she's been given the assignment from a publishing company to explore what women want and just the sex life of women in general in America. And at the beginning of the show, and Shailene Woodley plays who Lisa today was supposed to be, her character, but she goes by a different name. She goes by Gia, but Gia is really Lisa in this. So Gia's figure in her like say late 20s, early 30s, and she's living in New York City. And at this point, she's broke and she's not yet. She's in serious trouble given the fact that she can't produce and bring something to paper that her publishing company is giving the thumbs up to. So some of the advice she's given is why don't you just have sex with a lot of men and then figure out from there like what's it about? And she's like, no, I need to dig deeper into this because we're talking about women in America, right? And she speaks to someone else, like I guess higher up within the publishing company or someone who's has insight at the beginning of the series, and he's like, don't look just in New York City. You really need to search far and wide. What is the like the common American, like what does she desire? So she goes on a road trip and she goes to meet three different women over the course of a couple years span. And she initially starts in like small town in Indiana, and she meets Lena, who is played by Betty Gilpin, who is a housewife who's been married. She's got two or three kids, and she's in a very like Christian rural area, and she has not been touched by her husband in almost 3 months. And she's been gaslighted by even the priest in her town when they try to go to church and, get counseling. And he's like, well, if your husband doesn't want to kiss you, that's gross to him. He shouldn't have to kiss you. That's not nice of you to want him to kiss you or have him kiss. Yeah, basically like being intimate. If he doesn't want intimacy, you should listen to your husband. It's just absolute madness. And she's just at this point suffering not just sexually, but physically too. She's getting a lot of aches and pains. This woman, you meet her and she's got gloves on because she's got some nerve issues, which apparently you find out like sex relieves that. Yeah. So outside of that, she ends up going to this holistic doctor who's then like, go to a women's group who they come to find out Shailene Woodley's character Gia is leading, more so because she has an alternative, yeah, she's got like an agenda sort of, but she also wants to meet other women. But I guess, her other motives are to find a subject to write about. And she obviously, her and Lena like link up and become very close. And she says, if my husband doesn't decide to partake in the next couple of weeks, like I'm out, I'm walking out, I'm leaving, like F this. And this is a woman who ends up like discovering pleasure and finds that even just like this doctor straight up was like, you should masturbate. And she does. And all of a sudden her pain goes away and all this like Christianity that she's been told, like, no, do whatever your husband tells you. Like, no, like this is not working for her. It's just bringing her down in many cases, she's in a community with other women that are uptight that preach to her, you got to listen to your husband, whatever your faith tells you. And she's just like, screw this. I'm gonna go on my own path of exploration. And then she hits up on Facebook or some social media site the guy that she dated in high school, and then they just start hooking up. And she starts to learn that, starting over in your figure she's like in her 40s is not easy. And just because she had like a great sexual bond with this man from high school doesn't mean like he's gonna drop everything and then leave his life for her. So she's struggling emotionally, but she also realizes that these sexual needs are natural and things that she needs, and she shouldn't just have to be and suffer in a marriage that doesn't give her satisfaction sexually. So, yeah, exactly. Bye. So she leaves, and that's sort of her story. And then the next woman, well, the first episode, you meet all three women, well, the fourth woman being Gia, who's Lisa Taddeo, the actual author. And she's living in these areas and documenting and interviewing these women on just like what do they really desire and what is beyond your day to day on the surface of what people say. So for this woman, Lena, it's not only just a physical connection with another partner, but also just for her to be empowered in a way that makes her whole and makes her happy and even just physically helps her too. The second woman you meet is a Black woman who is an entrepreneur within the restaurant industry, and she's in a fairly happy marriage, but they have a very unique dynamic where the husband watches, well, they invite, let's just say, other people into the bedroom. And her husband has to approve of a man anytime they, will just say, mingle and kind of mention, hey, without being like, hey, we're swingers, bring your partner, etc. over. But the husband actually is someone that needs to approve, and oftentimes you notice it's a very specific type of male that he's approving of, which is interesting. So this journey is more of a, even though she has a lot of control sexually in the bedroom, her husband's the one who's actually like approving who she can sleep with while he watches, which is also like a whole other thing. Occasionally they'll bring in a couple where he hooks up with the woman, but the actual arrangement itself of this powerful woman who I guess gets off of hooking up with other men and having her husband hook up with a partner or watching, like this is what she desires, and just how this is, I guess, a dynamic that is often kind of taboo, but it's going on in America more than we think. And that's sort of explored in that sense, but also how this woman is finding her own voice and how she is just straight up like to her husband, I can sleep with whoever the fuck I want. You don't have to approve who I sleep with. So that's a whole other thing too, because there's a guy who she has her eye set on who's involved like indirectly with her business, who is a very attractive man who his name is Blair Redford, but he plays this guy named Will, and you meet him because he's the guy who's like getting the oysters for her restaurant. And he's a guy that works on boats and stuff, so he's more just not as like put together and is sort of just comes from, let's just say, cut from a different cloth than what she's used to bringing home and sleeping with. She's bringing home like other businessmen and entrepreneurs. And then you've got Will, who's very attracted to her and vice versa. And then she gets Will's girlfriend involved, who is in, we'll just say, like the industry of just, I believe, like mushrooms and stuff. And she does like more of the like holistic recreational drug world, but she gets her involved too so that the husband feels more comfortable in having this, we'll just say, different bedroom dynamic, more comfortable for them, because initially this husband rejects Will because I think he's just like, I don't want this guy in general, but you get to see that evolve in that relationship. And then the third woman, and this one is interesting because it's based on a true story and they use the woman's real name in this a series of events happened in 2008 and 2009. It's about a woman who's in her, this is the third woman. Her name's Maggie. This takes place in, I want to say, North Dakota, and she falls in love and has an inappropriate relationship with her high school teacher. And this showcases her, I want to say 3, 4, 5 after like college years, and she's working at Perkins as a waitress, and you see that she is unhinged and just mentally struggling and broken because of this love that she had with her teacher over a 3 month span her senior year, but she was technically a minor, and how she's been silenced for a number of years and how it broke her emotionally as a result of him ending it and then her being silenced because the man that she fell in love with is also like a winner of Teacher of the Year award numerous times, which is like very, I know, not the best. And he's someone who's beloved by everyone in the community. So this is actually a case that went forward in like 2014. And they show before every episode that they show Maggie's story, they'll say, hey, Aaron Knoble, who's the real life teacher, they used his name, was someone who was found innocent on all of these charges, and they go through the cases together, and it's that story I found to be the most interesting because this poor woman, there's so much evidence against this guy, and everyone loves this teacher. They would not believe it. And Lisa Taddeo, the author, is like the person who I think has really shed light on this is not okay. And there's so much evidence that's against this guy. And the fact that this whole community and the jurors found him not guilty is absolute bullshit. And let me tell Maggie's side of the story. So that's real. That's the only character. Apparently, she kept the real name. And you could actually Google and look up Maggie Wilkins and her story and about her teacher and such. But she was the third woman and just how she's able to grow. It's really trauma, like how she's able to unpack that trauma and then finally decide, I'm going to take this to court and do my best to get this guy fired as a teacher and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, that part is unsuccessful, but at least like the we'll just say the US now knows what a piece of shit is currently still in the school system in North Dakota, and that women's voices matter. And in many cases, things like this aren't reported until later because of the fact that I think a lot of women are discouraged because it's oftentimes these men who are predators that are very popular in their school districts, and they are often so popular to the point where people doubt that they're even capable of such things. So overall, what did I think of the series? First of all, it's a very sexual series. It's very there's a lot of drama and it's interesting, but not gonna lie, the end of the series was a bit flat for me. Where are we going? What are we trying to accomplish? Was the goal accomplished? Granted, I didn't read the book, but it's more just three women who break free from, I think, feeling silenced in their own relationship or a past relationship and how they're able to move forward. And that's the story that Lisa Taddeo was able to accomplish in her book and through this series. It didn't get the best, well, I shouldn't say it didn't get the best reviews, but if you go to Rotten Tomatoes, it's fascinating. So the audience gave it a 73%, whereas the critics gave it a 33. So there is, a nice gap there.
But it's based on a
I'm
book,
def
right?
It's based on a book,
Every
correct?
fucking time.
Yeah.
It's like every time.
But it's one of those things where it sounds in theory very interesting. And I'm not gonna lie, the first couple episodes, I'm like, okay, I like where this is going. And then it's just like, all right, we told their story. Like I just thought something more substantial would come out of this. Like, oh, we're gonna get justice. Like, unfortunately, Maggie didn't get, well, I guess she moved on, was able to recognize, like, hey, I can move forward from this. And then the other two, I mean, granted, I don't know like where they're at like today is in 2024, but like the woman who had relationships, she finally had a voice of no, I want to sleep with whoever I want to sleep with. So I guess it just explores the different type of sexual desires of women in the US, and there's a lot of different stuff going on behind closed doors that we may not be aware of. Could I, you know, move forward and never have seen this? Definitely. Was it a waste of my time? No, I just thought I was definitely intrigued by the first couple of episodes because I'm like, all right, where is this going? This is fascinating. And then it just by the end, I'm just like, okay, whatever. And meanwhile, Lisa Tadeo's character Gia, played by Shailene Woodley, falls in love with the guy and then just and gets pregnant and then decides to like run off and run away and not have him involved with her own child, which I think is kind of weird of its own. It's a little, I don't know. It's just showing different dynamics like in relationships, but I don't know, I don't think I like resonated with them that well. I was just more enticed, like, okay, where is this going? Three different relationships, a very sexual series, fascinating. There's a lot of drama here, but there wasn't like for me a common message at the end other than just, yeah, women stop being silent. I don't know. I didn't feel like I learned anything from the series. It was more just this is about three women and their stories, and they're very different, and it's about how they have been able to fulfill their needs of sexual desire. That was it. That was it. I don't know. I'm definitely more in line with the critics here because it didn't seem, I didn't feel like I had any answers at the end other than like this is what happened to them. And I mean, I guess the book is successful. I don't know if it's just because women are like, I want to read about other people's sex lives. That's what I'm thinking. Is this like a, oh, hey, 50 Shades of Grey was like very sexual. That was successful. Let's read about this. And this is like based on real life. I don't know. I don't know why it was so successful. I was just kind of over it after a couple of episodes and I just finished the series to finish it. But yeah, that's my thought process on it. But gentlemen, any questions or thoughts? What do we think?
I
Is this gonna be your next watch? Just kidding.
No, but I do like the cast. Like actually, I
It's
like
a good
Shailene
cast.
Woodley. I love Betty Gilpin. She's fantastic. She was on Nurse
Yeah,
Jackie, and she's incredible in that. She's been in a few
great.
things since that I've liked her in pretty much everything. She had a show on Peacock last year, the year before that I really enjoyed. I can't remember the name of it off the top of
Yeah.
my head. Um, DeWanda Wise is gorgeous. She was in Jurassic World Dominion. She's she's got those crazy eyes. Like she's a black woman, so her skin's really dark, but her eyes are like gold almost, like they're crazy. And then the other girl I'm not familiar with.
She plays
Um,
Maggie. She's the younger one. But
yeah.
yeah, even that, it's tough because they unfortunately, and I think that was a story that I was, I don't want to say most intrigued by, but unfortunately it's like pretty common the past 15, 20 years where a female, well, I shouldn't say female, but more teachers are being put in the spotlight
Mhm.
in not a good way, right? For having relations with their students. And
All right. First of all, I
unfortunately,
gotta jump in there really quick. I think the women teacher thing was probably happening all the time. The difference is, I think that it was kind of the way society was. If you were a dude, I mean, there's a song called Hot for Teacher. I
Oh
want to
yeah.
say Galen. If you're a high school dude and your teacher wants you, first of all, the teachers typically are not ugly, number one. I feel like they're basically women who haven't become adults. They still think they're kids in a way. So they're just like, I used to be a hot cheerleader. Let me just continue my life, even though I'm a teacher. So I feel like it happened. But basically back then it was more like score and like the guys would keep it a secret. I think
Mhm.
that's what happened back then. Even when I went to high school, there were rumors, like absolutely. And I feel like now it's like when you hear these rumors, there's probably smoke. Where there's smoke, there's fire. It always happened, I think. I think just now, people are different, society's changed, and
right,
there's
people are getting caught.
the double standard is not there anymore. I think a young boy at 17 is still going to be like, I got victimized. Whereas a young boy back at 17-year-old in the 70s or the 60s was like, score, I feel like that's it. That's it. I mean, just keeping it real, that's I think what happened. So I don't think it's like women all of a sudden decided, oh, we're gonna be predators too. Nah, I think it's it's always been happening.
Yeah, it's
That's my
just yeah.
unfiltered take.
Yeah, but this
I mean,
teacher
what's her name?
definitely,
Mary Kate Letourneau, whatever. Like they
Mary
ended up
Kay Latour. That's the
being,
most
yeah.
famous story.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's like it happened, and that the boy never thought of himself as a victim, even though she went to jail. They got married. You know what I'm saying? So I feel
Yeah.
like there is the mindset change in society, and I think it's a good thing. I don't think I think the whole idea of boys don't cry, nah, dude. Like we got to be as a society if we want equality. Like I think that we have to stop like making things so gendered, and so it's like no, we're all humans at the end
Hmm.
of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's just it's an interesting story, and just the fact that like no one believed her at all, and how broken she became, especially after he broke up with her. And I mean, really, based on the series, he broke up with her because his wife found out and saw texts. And they show in the, I mean, I was doing my own research afterwards because I was sort of invested in like the actual court case in real life. There were 93 calls, and out of those 93, I think they said there were like, I don't know, 5 to 10 after midnight. And he's like, no, everyone was like, he's the type of teacher that would go above and beyond when a student was struggling personally outside of school. They would go above and beyond. And then they would ask other teachers, did you call your students after midnight? Oh, no, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't, and that's okay. Like just completely just brushing everything under that rug. And it's beyond inappropriate. I don't know who those jurors were, but it's just amazing how this guy wasn't charged with anything. And the fact that he got all his pay back when I guess, because he was unfortunately during this time, during the trial and such, he was temporarily on leave. He got all his payback, and this guy is still teaching. It's kind of disgusting.
Part of that is because teachers are a union, right? Like, so
Hmm.
if said union, whichever chapter of the union he was, if they have great lawyers, then when you're a group of parents going up against, a union, you bet if you don't have better lawyers, you're going to lose. And those teachers' unions will put that money into protecting him because that's their job.
Hmm.
Even if it's like when you talk about police unions and you try to
Right.
deal with either bad actors in the police department or
Sure.
um, corruption in the police department, because whenever they do something wrong, the union stands behind them. So then you have this whole slew of people and money that comes in. You see it in all kinds of places. It's like in professional sports. If you want to try and change something against the players, like if you want to try and set a salary cap or do something that is going to directly affect the players or even affects one player in a certain way, the entire players union comes into play and you have all of this joint money and people and
Hmm.
this, you know, army basically behind you. So those unions are a hard thing to beat in those cases. And I would assume that's probably a good chunk um, of what, helped him get by is he probably had better lawyers.
I don't know. This guy was a very popular teacher, and he still is popular, and it's just amazing to me that like based on all the evidence that was presented, he was not charged with anything. Scot-free, and is still teaching to this day. I mean, and a lot of people didn't believe this woman, unfortunately, and she had a lot of family issues too. You come to find like her parents are alcoholics and stuff, and I think she just really trusted this guy. And then the best part, which is like, so I was a senior the same year. So this girl's she's my age, no question, like real life my age. I never got into the Twilight stuff, but she was like a real Twilight nerd and into like the YA books and anyway, so like she's obsessed with Twilight. She gave Twilight to her teacher, Mr. Knoble, to read, and he wrote all these love notes and put them on Post-its and gave her the book back so she could read through and think of them as a couple or whatever. And then she presented the book during the trial, and they had people verify that that's his handwriting and on all the notes that he wrote, everything. It's just like it's so gross to think that they're like, oh, it wasn't him. She wrote him.
See, but like that's like a predator's thinking. If you write it on a post-it note, that could be moved from any location to any other location. Doesn't mean it's where she says it was, right? So a good lawyer is going to, circumstantial, right? You can't prove that he's the one that put this thing there, right?
Right. Or even
It's
just like the call activity. How is any juror like, oh, that's normal calling someone past midnight or just 93 calls? Why do you have a student's phone number in the first place? It's crazy.
yeah. You can prove that it's inappropriate to a degree, but you can't prove what was done. So again, it becomes he said, she said. Like there's so much crap that goes into a court case that makes things so. I mean, look at O.J. Simpson.
Yeah.
Like if the glove don't fit, you know.
Must quit.
You must acquit. Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they even had her draw what his house looked like because apparently she had been over there at least once or twice to hook up with him when his wife and children weren't there. And she showed like what the house looks like and what rooms, like she drew almost like her own plan or what do you call it? She
Poor
had actual blueprints of the house. So it's just it's crazy. But yeah, I'm glad that at least Lisa today I was able to have her say her piece here because even though she lost in court, at least like the public knows what a piece of shit this guy is. And I mean, even though he's still teaching, like that's got to be humiliating. Like the rest of your life, you're known as like a sexual predator, and all of America knows it. And even though your community is quote unquote behind you and you're teaching, like you're gonna be forever known as a piece of shit. And honestly, I don't really care. I think this guy should.
I would bet it's been long enough that he's probably at least tried again.
Yeah, you think
Like
after all that?
yeah,
I
sure.
don't. And the
The
fact
other
that his wife's still with him, like, what? She's weak, dude. She's weak. How do you stay with someone like that? And clearly, she knew if she got the text messages, so bad.
Yeah.
You know what? I would say this. I don't think the story's over. The reason why is because remember, R. Kelly beat his court case in 2003. Then
Hmm.
the documentary Surviving R. Kelly came out. They reopened the case and he went to jail. Same thing, even with his Diddy thing. Like, he settled with Cassie, and then this video comes out, and
Hmm.
then the feds go after him. So I think that what things like this video does is if it generates enough of a firestorm, they'll
Oh, you
reopen the
mean like the series you think
yeah,
will reopen a
they'll reopen
case?
the
Yeah,
case and then something will happen. So I would say I think number one, like it's never over if you're guilty. Number two, I think the reason why a show like this does do well is because, I'm not a woman. But I get the impression that women a lot of times feel like their voices aren't heard. So I
correct.
think that if this is a series that makes women feel heard, and it's not about necessarily, oh, I have to say something profound. It's like, I'm just saying something, period.
Right.
My voice is being heard. And I think that's what a show like this, Three Women, um, provides.
Right. And I think the way that she had it, I mean, granted, again, didn't read the book. There are very different women in different stages of life. The first two women that I told you about, the entrepreneur who lives, I'll call it the swingers life, whatever. Her goals are very different than the housewife in middle of nowhere, Indiana.
And that's the thing that housewife thing, like, for those in the cast or the watching right now, I typed in as Lauren talked, I said 3 months is nothing. I have heard a shocking amount of sexless marriages. Like they're out there. Like try 5 years, try 7 years, try 11 years, try 12 years. It's out there. So,
Yeah.
it's like I think people it's a trip and it's never an easy situation. But I'm sure there's a lot, and a lot of those people don't talk about their sex lives. Like it's weird,
No,
right? So to be able to watch something and go, I'm not the only one, I'm sure has got to be a bit comforting.
for sure. And also just the fact that this woman was gaslighted by her whole community, by her, like, why are we going to a priest to talk about whether she should be not having sex with her husband? Like, that's just weird.
By the way, I'm sure there are some states where that's called abandonment, and I think that's grounds for divorce. So
Really?
yeah, it's what do they call it? The obligations or something? Like the obligations is like a euphemism for sex. But yeah, no,
Sure.
it's abandonment. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm sure it is. but it's state
Yeah,
by state.
it's less so than it used to be, right? That's like most states have no fault marriage or no fault divorce now, where you don't have to prove that somebody did something. Like you used to have to be able to do that to get a divorce, right? Prove that somebody cheated, somebody
Right.
did something wrong. Um, so yeah,
Yeah, and it's really rare from like a female standpoint, but just even like the scene where she's like, "I'm leaving," and he's like, "Why?" And the fact that like she's like, "No, like I don't really have to tell you anything, but we're done."
yeah,
And the fact that all of these other women before she joined the group were like, "Yeah, I mean, you have to be with your husband if he doesn't want to be intimate with you. You know, that's part of life."
Last thing I'll
Completely.
say on this
What?
is the last thing I'll say on this is in
Mhm.
general, I'm always about at the end of the day, you gotta do for you as a human. I think that if you are too influenced by those around you, you're never gonna get what you want. I think you have to
Correct.
know who you are, know where you want to go, and do it. And if it means cutting people off, so be it. Like you got to have strong boundaries. And I think that's like so. At the end of the day, I'm glad that she. It sounds like she did it. But yeah, don't listen to other people. They don't have to deal with your consequences. They don't. No, I mean, people can help, sure, but I think at some point you have to be able to draw a line from what you want and what they want.
Right.
End of.
Yeah. So I think it accomplishes the goal, like you said, of just women being able to see on screen that there are some issues that perhaps are not being discussed that are more popular than we think and feel, and just how we are not alone. There is someone that may have gone through something similar to one of these three women, and just being able to have a voice to communicate what you want down the line, whether it be to have a say of who you sleep with and when you have sex, or even just if you've been wronged in the past, being able to move forward and say, hey, this was an inappropriate relationship, or what happened to me was not right. I need to be open about this. And even if it's, I mean, that's why when people are like, oh, well, why didn't they report it back then? And I mean, we very well know why people didn't report things back then. And they were either completely just written off. If someone went to the police in like the 60s or 70s and was like, my teacher touched me or whatever, they'd escort you out and they would not want to listen to you at all.
yeah,
So, whether they were at the time, because at the time she fell in love with this teacher. This teacher was so manipulative and like reading the work that she was reading. I mean, the whole Twilight thing was crazy to me. I want to know what you love in your world. I'm going to leave my wife when you're done with college, 5 years, just feeding into her desire in that case. And then as soon as the wife found out, done. Sad. And like when you're 17, 18, you don't have.
Your brain's not fully formed till like
Correct.
5.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's no way you know how to handle that. And plus, how do you even tell anybody, "Hey, I've had a relationship with my high school teacher"? Like that's not something that I mean, she didn't tell any of her friends, her family until years later. She just kept that silent inside her, and unfortunately, she doesn't go to college. She goes down a bad path. Not that like it's wrong not to go to college, but she just ends up
Derailed.
derailed and gives up just having any aspirations because she feels like, what's the point? Someone that I truly deeply cared about just cut me out and rejected me, and why even bother? So that's where I think she becomes this broken individual. I mean, you see her in the beginning, she's on her like her lunch break or her break at work at Perkins, and she's got a cigarette outside, and you could just tell this is someone who's been through it. So, and she's got not the best upbringing with, alcoholic parents and stuff. So that's really tough as well. Um, one last bit. So I grew up in Rockland County, and it's funny because there are certain scenes, specifically within the Maggie story in North Dakota, where there's one scene in particular where I was like really excited because so they're in Barnes and Nobles, and then they come out of the Barnes and Nobles, and it's this shopping plaza that I have gone to growing up many, many times. Because then you see the diner in town, and then you see the Men's Warehouse, the Starbucks. This is a shopping center that I grew up going to a lot growing up throughout my childhood, and even just within like the past couple of weeks when I was home visiting family. So it's very funny to see that North Dakota is in Rockland County, New York, and how they filmed a couple of scenes that were supposed to be in different parts of the country, which were actually filmed elsewhere. So that was pretty cool.
Word up.
Cool.
Yeah. So go see it, guys, if you want.
Feel good fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sounds like a lot of joy, a lot of light, you know.
Yeah, I just didn't like the ending. It was like super flat. I'm like, okay, what was the intent? But I don't know. The ending was a little
So
flat.
watch the first few episodes for the horny stuff and then just let it go. And it's a great series.
Basically,
Yeah, there you go.
that's it. Just watch the sex scenes and then call it a day. That's it. Done.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. Well, going from that bit of joy, I'm going to take us slowly have us head on our way out, take us to Nerd Town here. I have started watching Skeleton Crew on Disney Plus, which is a new Star Wars series that just literally started last week. The first two episodes dropped together. It will be weekly from here on out. Um, it just started, so there's not a whole lot to talk about it necessarily, but it's drawn a lot of comparisons to the Goonies. It is the story of a bunch of kids going on an adventure in space in a spaceship that they ultimately come across. To me, the way that the more that I read about it before it came out, the more what I thought of it as is a mix between Goonies and The Explorers, which are both very 80s, you know, kids adventure movies, right? We had a lot of those like E.T. and stuff like that in the 80s. And these kids are all young, somewhere between 10 and 13. Like they're not really old kids, right? They're not high school age or anything like that. And they the one kid is the main character. He's not necessarily a screw up, but he has a single dad that kind of leaves him alone a lot of the time, and he's doing everything he can to be a kid and have a fun time. And he's got a friend who is some kind of non-human species that kind of looks like an elephant, but is super fucking adorable. Like he's a little doofy and really sweet. And so some things happen. He ends up being late for school one day and tries to ride his bike instead of taking the bus. And one of the things that's cool is this takes place in the Star Wars universe. But the way they set up this planet in the beginning, it's very, very, very Earth-like. Like you literally have neighborhoods with grass lawns, streets. People take buses to school. Kids have bikes that aren't like speeder bikes from the other ones. Like this is very much an 80s small town moved into Star Wars. And it works. Like it's just this is where they live, right? Like if you think about Star Wars and it's a whole galaxy, like there's planets everywhere, so that they're all going to be different. Um, and so the kid is late for something, he kind of veers off the path and falls into this ravine. And because he is a kid that dreams of being a Jedi, even though the Jedi are effectively gone, this takes place between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. So it's somewhere in that area. Um, he finds this metal hole in the ground and, can't do anything about it. Ends up back at the school, ends up in trouble for being late. There's a girl sitting next to him who is very much a troublemaker. And his dad comes out and he says something about finding a Jedi temple in the ground because he's so wrapped up in the Jedi. And so they go or he goes back later that night to dig into the thing. Well, the girl overheard him and she found it first. So they have this whole thing about who's claiming it, who it really belongs to, right? Like they have this very, very kid argument about it, right? Like it's like, well, you didn't say claimsies, so it's mine, right? Like that's their whole argument. Very, very, teenage kid argument. Um, and they ultimately open it up and find out that it's a ship instead of a Jedi base. And of course, our main character is a kid that just can't help himself, can't control himself, and he finds this green button and pushes it, and the ship takes off and launches into space. And what we find out once the ship gets into space, and that these kids can't control it at this point, they don't know what they're doing, um, is that people on this planet don't understand that there's something beyond their planet. Like they've heard of stars, but they've never seen them. There's like this green cloud that's in the sky all the time. So, and they call it the barrier. And so nobody knows what's basically just beyond beyond the clouds. And so they get out there, and the first thing they are is just amazed by all these stars that they have no idea, what they are. And then they're screwing around again. The kid hits the button, they jump to hyperspace, and now all of a sudden they're lost, super far from home. And they there's a droid on board that powers back on with the ship. His designation is like SM-33, which is a take on Smee from Hook, because one of the things this show is about, there were pirates. There's a lot of space pirates out there at this time in the story, and it actually opens up with a relatively brutal, like, space pirate scene. And so that all goes sideways before the show starts. And so this droid is very much a pirate. Like, he's got like kind of a pirate voice and stuff. Um, and he's a lot of fun, but he tells them, the ship is damaged. The ship is in bad shape. It's been buried in the ground for however long it's been buried in the ground. So they need to repair it. So the second episode, they go to a space station, which is basically like a pirate space station. There's just a bunch of bad people around, and they need to fix up the ship. And so they work on getting their parts and doing all that. And then as they're leaving, they bump into a Jedi, and that's where that episode ends. So there's not a lot um, that necessarily has happened in the beginning, but you do have a lot of things unfolding that kind of set up the world and the things that they're experiencing and kind of where they are in the Star Wars universe. But what's really great about it is it captures all of the fun and joy of the Goonies, of Explorers. Like this, it's not cheesy, and the kids aren't stupid. It works. If you were a fan of the Goonies, there's no reason you wouldn't be a fan of Skeleton Crew. It 100% has that feel. The kids are all really good actors for the parts they're playing. Um, I'm not sure how I feel about the droid speaking like a pirate, but it's still fun, so it still works. He even has one eye, like one of his eyes doesn't work because he's a droid. And the running gag about that is that he's been on the ship for so long and powered down that there's a rat that's been living in his head. So every now and then it climbs out and climbs back in. But again, it's not overdone. It's not like overly cheesy. It's just like these things that in other iterations of even things in Star Wars recently could be done corny. This is just it's a kid's adventure story set in Star Wars that feels like the ones that we grew up on. And in that regard, it works really, really well. It's not going to be, at least doesn't feel like it's going to be high drama. It's not going to be like The Acolyte, where it's got like a deeper message, or it's doing this other stuff. This is an adventure. It's not, Ahsoka, where it's dark and, a lot of fighting and murder and all that, or, it's probably the closest to The Mandalorian, which, has, a lone wolf and cub kind of story thing going on. But even this is just more fun. Like, this is literally just a fun story. It's got its danger. It certainly has, explosions and death and Star Warsy stuff, but it's an adventure. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think it's something that may not be for everyone, but I think it has its place in the Star Wars universe. Like, I think these things need to exist to make the universe bigger and open it up a little more. It's not saying that everything that comes after this has to be a Star Wars kids show. Like, I'm ready for Ahsoka season 2. I want to see that stuff. I wish The Acolyte had gotten a season 2. I'm down for more Star Wars movies when they make them, all that stuff, and they can be darker. I don't have a problem with that. Keep telling the darker stories too, but there's a place for adventure um in Star Wars. There was a thing that came out or at least became more public again last week, where Denis Villeneuve, who directed I don't know, whatever it is. He's one of those guys that's really a little too big for his britches when he talks. He's very pompous, and he was like, "Oh, well, Return of the Jedi killed Star Wars for me because of like the Ewoks or whatever." And he's like, before that, it was super adult and super mature and blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, just fucking watch the movies or don't. Like, I'm sorry, it wasn't your movie to make. It wasn't your universe to create. So if you don't like it, cool. But like, I don't know. He just thinks he's got to talk about every damn thing, and I want to punch him in the nuts. But the point is that like this is one of those things that would have come out of that universe. It is a younger thing, like it's for kids to see. Um, but like the thing to remember, like when I watched Return of the Jedi, I was like 7, like or younger. Like I watched this as a kid and fell in love with it. I had already seen Empire as a kid and enjoyed it. Like even though it wasn't childish, it was kid friendly. Like, so Star Wars was always a thing for kids. We grew up with it. So now we want it to be more adult. And it wasn't necessarily made for kids, but kids watched it. So, to be able to bring people back into that. Now, we saw failures in the 80s with, the Battle for Endor and the Star Wars Holiday Special. And we saw those things that didn't work. Um, but this is I saw one person compare this show also to like Disney's Treasure Planet, the animated film, which was an actually fantastic version of Treasure Island, animated that Disney made back in the day. And I can see that comparison. Like it's a space adventure with pirates and all that stuff. And it just seems like it's going to be a lot of fun and worth watching if you're not only into Star Wars um, for the darker, headier stuff. I think this did pretty well on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. I forgot to look it up. I could probably find it really quick, but um, oops, no, I can't do it quick. I'm bad at this apparently. Skeleton Crew, there it is. Um, so it's a 7.2 on IMDb. The first 2 episodes, I never understand this. The first episode is a 7.7, second episode is a 7.7, but the series is a 7.2. So I don't know how that works.
And 96% critics, 82% audience.
Yeah, and that tracks for me. I would think the critics probably would be a little friendlier to it because they're just going to be like, oh, this is, something new and fun and whatever. But it's also well made. Like the kids are good kid actors. Um, it visually looks incredible. Like it looks really good. They put the money into it. So all the production quality stuff is there. It'll be interesting to see how it fleshes out as it goes. It's a 8 episode season. So it'll go pretty quick. Like it'll be done by the end of January. Um, actually by middle of January, January 14th is the last episode. And yeah, it'll be what it'll be, but it's been a lot. It starts off really fun. So um I'm excited to see where it goes. And I think that audience score is actually really telling because the Star Wars um, fandom it can be somewhat toxic sometimes. So for the fact that they kind of let this be and let it be an 80, it doesn't seem like it got review bombed. I actually haven't seen any real hate out there for it. Which is good because it's a show about little kids. Like this fandom, if they went after kids, I'd be really upset. Because they have historically gone after some people who I really like. They went after the girl, the Asian girl from
Rose,
this,
Chica.
yeah, her, and they went after Daisy Ridley. Like Daisy Ridley quit social media for a long time. Like the it's not the best fandom when it comes to this kind of stuff, and for them to effectively leave this alone is a little telling in my opinion too. That it's good enough that people aren't bitching about it. So yeah, it's fun. I definitely recommend it to anybody that wants to give it a go. If you look at it and you're like, I don't like kid adventure movies, then it's not going to be for you, and that's okay. I feel like if you watch the trailer, it is exactly what you see in the trailer, and if that's not for you, then it's not going to be for you. If you're curious, then it probably is, and if you love those things, then it's definitely for you. So,
Well, I'll just say that I was surprised to see Jaleel White in the cast
yes, yeah,
as
he
well.
was. I was like, that's Urkel.
Yeah, good for him. I don't think he's anything high profile since really.
It's still not high,
Uh,
but his part's pretty small, at least in this
Okay.
episode that he showed up in.
Well, as a project, I mean high profile. Like this is not like yeah, this is a big deal. It's Disney Plus, it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it definitely looked interesting to me. What I will, if you don't mind me squeezing it in, what I'll say then is maybe you keep track of this one, and I'm gonna keep track of Creature Commandos really quick. I'm gonna squeeze it in. It's gonna be a 5 minute little segment because I know we're running late. But the
This
reason
one
why I
just
watched
started
Creature
too, right?
Commandos is
We're
because
in the same
yeah,
boat.
it just started. Yeah, same boat. It's only 7 episodes. Is it's really James Gunn's like I think kind of first like DCU
Yeah.
project that is purely DCU. What I can say about it is I think keep watching it. I am not a James Gunn stan. Like I'm not the guy. Like I'm definitely more skeptical of him. I'm not like I think he's really more of a goofy, fun kind of guy, and goofy fun is not necessarily my jam. That said, watching the show, it reminds me of Invincible, if you guys know that show,
Hmm.
except it's rougher. It's as in it's more violent, I think. And well, actually, no, Invincible's pretty violent.
Yeah.
It's probably the
Yeah.
same level of violence, but it's more sexual. That I will absolutely say. I do think James Gunn is like super creative. I imagine as a kid, he was probably the kid who was always getting in trouble in school because he was always fidgeting, couldn't keep still because this guy there's just so much going on. He wrote the dialogue, he wrote the story. And basically the premise of Creature Commandos is it is again, my God, what's her name? Amanda Waller, who is this kind of like neutral. She's not a villain, but she's not a hero either. Like she always has these task forces of like superheroes who are kind of villains. So because Congress shut down the Task Force X program, which is supervillains who are human, she decides, well, these are monsters. So I'm gonna skirt this law. I'm not using human villains. I'm using monster villains. So if we get caught, we have some sort of argument. So she sends these villains out to defend this nation of Pakistan. They made it up. Under attack by the sorceress Circe, who basically feels like she's the rightful queen of Themyscira, which is basically the land of the Amazons where Wonder Woman lives. And she has the help of these guys called the Sons of Themyscira. Now, these guys are basically incels. They're like, it's BS that this island nation can cater to women when why can't we have it too? Like we're men, we have rights. So basically they have linked up with Circe, who's like again, she's rightful heir, and they're trying to invade, I guess, Pakistan. So Rick Flag Sr., who is Rick Flag's father, played by Frank Grillo, is kind of like the main character. That raccoon weasel guy who showed up in like Suicide Squad, he's in
Hmm.
it. He's hilarious and weird. But you've got casts like Indira Varma, I love her. She plays the Bride of Frankenstein. David Harbour is Frankenstein, and it's great to see David Harbour in both of DC and Marvel. That's cool. Sean Gunn's playing two characters. Alan Tudyk is in here. Maria Bakalova, who's also in Guardian. So I think that's
Hmm.
another thing about James Gunn. He
He
works with a
works for
lot
the
of the
same
same
people.
people, which
Yeah.
made fun a guy to work with. So overall, I said I was going to be quick. I am going to be quick. Viola Davis is in it again. Basically, I think it's worth watching. It's only 7 episodes. And yeah, had I not watched Invincible, I wouldn't be into this. But because it's basically Invincible with a bit more sex, they even got a robot, a Nazi killing robot, who reminds me of the robot from Invincible. Like, I think it's zany and it's cool and it's like I want to see James Gunn. Like, you are a creative dude. Let's see what you can come up with. So yeah, you got choices. You can watch the kids doing their Goonies thing in space. You can watch Creature Commandos to warm you up for Invincible coming out next, I think, February or January.
Soon, yeah, yeah.
And yeah, just wanted to make sure, even though I'm not a James Gunn like acolyte per se, um, I am a pop culture person, so I'm going to educate myself and check this out. Which is why I was surprised that you were like, I'm not sure I care, and then you're kind of like interesting when I said I was going to watch it because I thought you were thinking Andrew doesn't like James Gunn. Like, why does he care?
Yeah, yeah. I'll probably still watch it because I know it does. It's officially part of his DCU, right? Like this is part of the universe that he's going to be creating with Superman, with the Green Lantern series, with all the stuff that's coming out. So it matters. Um, I just yeah, I feel inundated with cartoons right now, and like to see something that feels like it's so much like Invincible. Um, that I don't know. I don't know. Not that I necessarily wanted to see it live action, but this is like it's like you took Invincible and Peacemaker and mashed them together into an animated series and went off that way because I I actually really enjoyed Peacemaker, which is James Gunn's. I liked his Squad better than the first Suicide Squad. Um, and I'm one of the people that's 100% excited for Superman. Like I'm the trailer's got to be coming soon. They said mid-December. So I'm really curious about that one. Um, but like I believe in James Gunn. I don't necessarily like I think he's not, doesn't have the Midas touch. Like everything he's gonna do isn't necessarily gonna turn to gold. But when I look at something like the Guardians of the Galaxy, where the first one was really good, the second one was it was all right, not bad, whatever. The third one was a fucking emotional roller coaster. Like the third one was literally made to break you and did in a lot of places. He's got range. He's done good stuff. His career started with weird horror and some other stuff. He did Slither, I think was his first like big film and stuff like that. So he's all over the place. But he generally does pretty well. Like I said, I don't necessarily I I was excited when he took over for DC because it was somebody that I think is more broad-minded than somebody like Zack Snyder. Like Zack Snyder has a very kind of singular vision. If you watch any Zack Snyder movies, they're all the same. And James Gunn spreads it out a little bit more. He can be silly, but he can be dramatic. He does these things that are different. So, to see somebody like that, um, at the top and who seems like a huge fan of comic books in general, to see that he did as much in Marvel as he did, and then is also a fan of DC, loves DC and wants to do that. Um, it'll be really interesting to see what comes out of that. Um, but yeah, I might watch Creature Commandos just because of the fact that it fits in. Like that might be enough for me. I just got to find the time to do it. Um, I can't watch it with my family, which makes it harder for me because once everybody in my house goes to bed, I start watching TV and I usually just fall asleep. So, if I have a slower work week, maybe I can put it on while I'm working or something. Um, but it definitely is less of a family show, obviously. So I'll have to find places to squeeze it in. That's what makes it harder. The Skeleton Crew is easy. Everybody in the family wants to watch it, so we sit down and watch it together, which is also really nice. Um, but yeah, I'll probably give it a watch at some point.
Thank you for letting me just get that in.
Yes, yes, I definitely. I mean, yeah, it's got a great cast. And I know I've seen some pictures of in these first two episodes, there's some sort of like it's either a flash forward or a dream sequence or something like that where uh
Superman. Us.
yeah, Superman's dead, like they lost is what, kind of gives you that feeling that whatever the good guys lost to whatever. I don't know the story yet. Um, but that's the other thing too, like with a show like this, even with Invincible, although I've given Invincible the benefit of the doubt because it's a well-made show, the animation style, especially coming after something like Arcane,
Thank you. It was
seems
painful.
yeah, it seems so dialed back. It seems so like
It's
paint by
it's it's
numbers
well,
and
Oh my God. So check this out. Like, so having grown up on 80s anime, whenever I would watch like Astro Boy or even like the Super Friends, it was painful. I couldn't even watch filmation stuff like He-Man. Some people, Scooby-Doo. Some people don't care. I care. So for me, the anime Robotech stuff is just a lot more, it's just better animation
Hmm.
than the 70s and 80s stuff. So now after watching Arcane, this seemed so lame. And but it's just like, you know what? Whatever. If I could survive 70s like Battle of Planets, Gatchaman, whatever, like, that's what it's like. It's like you just have to like forgive the bad animation. Well, bad now because Arcane ruined it for everybody,
Yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
just focus on the story.
Yeah, yeah, and that was always my thing. Even with Invincible, like Invincible felt very like these are our hard lines, and we colored them in with these very flat colors that, there's not a lot of texture and tone to everything. And that's what I saw from Creature Commandos. And like I said, it is more amplified because you come from something like Arcane, where, I mean, every single line, every single brushstroke, everything is done with intent.
Even
Um,
AOT feels whack now. Like, I mean, I love it, but it's just like it pains me, uh, just like it pains Lauren to be sticking around while we're talking about this geek shit. No, it pains me that like this beautiful anime is now like B compared
but
to
But like to me, like that I'm okay with. Like that's still something that they put texture into. Like it feels more drawn and more painted and more everything than even Invincible. Like if I look, I would rather watch something that visually looks like Attack on Titan than I would Invincible or Creature Commandos. Like they still have that like kid cartoon look to them
right.
that is like a feel, like it's a vibe, right? That's kind of what they're trying to do. But it's just a harder vibe to sell when these other things are out there that are made for adults.
It feels
That,
cheap.
yeah, exactly. And they're not, but they do. I mean, Invincible feels like a kid's cartoon that happens to be incredibly adult. And I would imagine that Creature Commandos has that same feel. Whereas, Arcane feels like a TV show. Like, and then it's mature, so it's made for adults. Like there's a different Attack on Titan. You watch that and you're like, this is not made for kids. They didn't, even though it doesn't feel as amazing as Arcane, like they put effort into the art. Like it looks legit, and that's where the difference is. So I think you gotta. I think we're at the point now where you've got to up your game. Like I said, for me, I think Invincible and probably Creature Commandos are going for a vibe, so that's why they look the way they do. They could have done better animation. They had both of them have the budget to do it and all that,
They had no
but
idea Arcane was going to come and do what it did. Like I feel like they're just from a different era. It's like you're driving a 1984 car and the 1985 came out and it's just like completely changed the game. And now I mean it's just yeah, I mean you get the point, but I just feel like it's just not even fair. It's like it's an upgrade. It's like they're Blackberries and Arcane is like an iPhone or a
yeah,
Galaxy. It's like it's just a different genre of phone. And these are different like it's just a different game. And Arcane is set the bars. Arcane and Spider-Verse are now a new
yeah,
bar. So you want
yeah,
to be animation, you got to come with that. Otherwise, you are playing in the B League and just know that and be okay with it.
yeah. Well,
Oh,
that's funny that you use the BlackBerry iPhone comparison because I don't think most people will get that. But
okay.
but the BlackBerry was the shit. The BlackBerry was the best phone on the market, hands down.
Yes.
You could do everything on it. The iPhone came out and everybody was like, "Yeah, I don't know about this thing." And within a year, BlackBerry was dead.
Done.
It was gone and dead. And it was literally the upper echelon of phone, especially in the work world. Like you did everything on this phone. You had a keyboard, you could do everything, had a screen, had a little trackball, everything you needed on your phone. Like it was this technical marvel. And when they heard iPhone was coming out, this was the problem. This is the same problem with animation. They looked at what the iPhone was doing and said, "We don't have to change anything. We're going to be fine." And then by the time they figured out they needed to change, BlackBerry tried to put out a touchscreen phone. They tried to do those things, and it was too
Didn't do
late.
that.
They were done. And so you're gonna hopefully see that in animation where they're gonna put out some stuff that doesn't look as good as what we see in Arcane now, and people are going to be like, "Fuck, we've got to at least get closer to that. We've got to push the bar higher because that's where it is now." Um, and at some point, it has to be. Now, I also know that the budget for Arcane is insane. Creating a show in that vein is not easy, but you've got to come closer. You've got to come meet in the middle or something. You know. So yeah, I think that actually with Creature Commandos was by far my biggest turnoff. Was just the look of it when I saw the stuff. I was like, this is just cartoon. Even comic books have more detail in the art than these shows do. So that's where that's where my problem lies the most. Not even in the voice acting because the voice cast is incredible. Um, and I assume this is more fun in even though it's a little dark and twisty, like
Yeah,
it's got some
it's
fun
a
to it.
thousand
Yeah,
percent fun. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I'll probably give it a go. So all right, cool. Does anybody have anything else that they want to throw out here before we all age out of existence and fall asleep? All right then. I'm trying to think what comes out next week. And I don't know. There was something actually that I thought came out, but I can't think of what it was.
I will say
Uh,
one thing. I might finish the madness. I'm not sure.
oh yeah, yeah. I want to watch that. I want to start that
Yeah,
one.
this was I started it, but I was just like, there's no way I'm gonna finish this in time for the show, so I switched. But I'm not sold. Like had
Really?
nah, I mean no.
Yeah.
Had Andy not like I'm gonna finish it for the sake of Andy, or at least try to get as far as I can. But thrillers aren't really my thing anyway, you know. So if
It,
you're into thrillers and stuff, then
is it a
maybe
thriller? Like to
yeah.
me, like I watched the trailer and number one, I love Coleman Domingo. I actually really he was on Fear the Walking Dead, and that's when I discovered him for the first time and fucking loved him in that. But this feels like, watching the trailer, and it sounds shitty to say, but it really like the trailer that I saw really just made it feel like it's a entire show about black people good, white people bad, and like that was like the whole thing. And I was like, I mean, I get what they're doing, and they're not wrong, especially when you set it in like the area that they're kind of setting it in. But I didn't get the feeling from the trailer that it was a thriller at all.
Yeah, man. Like it's like yeah, it's like it's a bit of a bait and the switch. Or like, oh yeah, you know. No, dude, it's like it's a bit more okay, can I say a little bit about it then?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
just yeah.
because I'm
So
curious. So
basically, yeah, basically I think the premise is Coleman Domingo is this like CNN correspondent. He goes into the woods, meets up with a white supremacist. White supremacist ends up dead. He's being framed for the murder of the white supremacist by this far left group, like Antifa group. That's what's happening. So it's like it's a little bit more complicated than that, you know, because it's like, yeah, black guy still getting the fall, but he's getting the fall for this far left group who probably looks at him like he's like a I hate to use the word Uncle T, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's like he's not doing enough for the struggle, basically. So
mhm.
he's a sacrificial lamb. You know, we're gonna take out this white supremacist, but we're gonna blame it on him, so all is good. That's the impression I get. But then the other thing I just get really kind of like I'm tired of, and I don't know why some actors keep doing this, is the excessive use of the N word as far as just like me, it's like them amongst each other. It's like, no, we don't do that, man. Like it's a low class word. Like I swear to God, and this guy's supposed to be his correspondent, and he's still using this. You're just going to be confusing the general public, and people don't get race still to this day, and they fucking never will, pardon my French. So it's like you're just making the waters even muddier. I hate that shit. It's dumb.
And
But either way, it's like I think it was the number one show on Netflix
yeah,
for a while. So that kind of makes sense. But at the same time, I'm just like, I'm
that's
not into thrillers and I'm not into the hood shit. So this has nothing for me.
well, it's only a 6.5 on IMDb. It's interesting that they use the N word so much. This show was created by a white dude.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's not good. Sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, I was gonna start it, and I just I got the vibe that I got from the trailer, and it certainly didn't give me enough of like a thriller vibe to make it seem interesting. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I might wait for you to finish before I decide to watch it. But like part of me is like I really want to support Coleman Domingo because I do enjoy his work. Like, he's really talented. Um, and partially because I feel like, even though it's not true, like I feel like I discovered him, right? Like I saw him on The Walking Dead before people were talking about him, before he was, winning awards. It's like Mahershala Ali. I love following his career because I saw him in a show called The 4400 like a billion years ago
Boy, how
before
was he
he was
first?
anybody. And then now he's somebody. So like I've got this like I discovered this guy even though, I have nothing to do
So
with it.
funny you said that. Mahershala Ali could have totally played this role. I bet you they might have even written it with him in mind. And I would actually buy Mahershala more. And I wonder if Mahershala would have been smart enough to be like, yo, take that N-word shit out of here. We don't need it. Like I think that like Denzel, for example, is smart enough to say he went to what's his name? Famously, he went to what's his name? Oh my God, that Pulp Fiction guy. Forget his name. But he went to him and was like, "Why? What was up with the dead end storage thing?" I mean, that movie, Pulp Fiction, has the N word so many times.
Hmm.
This stupid ass director was like, "Oh yeah, well, if we say it enough times, it'll take this thing away." Like, no, dude, stop being an ass type. Anyway, I think some actors are smarter than others, and I just think that that's a word that confuses the hell out of Americans. Why do they get to say it? Meanwhile, it's like
Especially if you're
all the
putting it in
other,
a show that seems like it's very black versus white. Like if
yeah,
you're
it
if you're
just
gonna do that, it doesn't help
at
the
all.
argument, I don't think. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, so I'm gonna finish it, or at least try, and then we'll go from there. Because it's unfair to judge something without having seen the whole thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm really curious to see where you finish. Looking at it, like I said, on IMDb, the 6.5 is not good. And
Rotten
the
Tomatoes is
final episode's a 6.9. And no episode is above a 7.5.
see, Rotten Tomatoes has it as come on,
I
internet.
feel like it's going to be higher. Is it
Oh,
not?
oh, I am so vindicated. All right, so the critics is at 74.
Yeah.
Audience is the inverse, 47%, dude. So yeah, we were like, this shit is whack, dude. So you know what, Andy, I love you. But I was worried because you were raving about it, and we all know, like, if you
When
rave
Andy
on
raves,
something,
it's
you just know
questionable.
that, okay, yeah. But anyway, we love you. We love you. But 47%, that is not good.
Yeah, that's a bit of a turnoff, man.
You know what? Maybe, you know what? I think we've decided. You know what? I'm skipping it.
Yeah.
We just
Yeah.
reviewed the damn show. 47%. I got better shit to do with my time.
Yeah, exactly. So, all right. Well, I won't watch that dumpster fire this week. I'll find something else. I'll talk a little bit about Skeleton Crew next week. You'll probably talk a little bit about Creature Commandos. We'll see what else is out there. Um, Lauren will find intelligent content while I will try and find garbage content, and we'll go from there.
Someone
Um,
intelligent. It could be trash again. Who knows? This week
oh,
was somewhat, yeah.
one more thing. I don't need to say a lot about it, but I've been waiting for years. The Dark Tower movie with Idris Elba was streaming on Netflix. I'm a huge Stephen King fan. I've read everything except the last couple of books because it's a lot harder for me to find time to read right now. Um, but I have read the Dark Tower series more than once. It's a 6,000 page ish story. It's 7 books long, lots of stuff. They turned it into a hour and 45-minute film, changed so much about it, and the film itself is bad. Like it's just not a good movie anyways. Not only did they just absolutely molest the story, like they just fucking they kept two major characters out, like they did all this stuff. It's nonsense. It's just a bad film. This is one of those things where they like race swap the character, and it really doesn't work. Like I was never mad about actually about the race swap. The problem is that in the Dark Tower, the main character Roland is they literally all the time call him long, dark, and ugly. Like he's supposed to be tall. He was based on Clint Eastwood when Stephen King wrote it. Like a tall, gangly, old, like washed up Clint Eastwood is what he always had in mind. And so, like, if you had cast Chris Rock and you were going to gender swap it, like physically, I'd be like, that is more like the character. Like he's not supposed to be imposing. And Idris Elba's a dreamy motherfucker. Like he's a big, handsome guy, which is the exact opposite of what the character's supposed to be. So like it wasn't the race that bothered me, it was the physicality of the character that they changed that bothered me. And then they cast Matthew McConaughey as the bad guy. And I'm like, Matthew McConaughey should have been the gunslinger. He's physically like too handsome probably, but like it wasn't the right casting. Like there's just so many problems with it. And like I watched it with my kids because I knew it was going to be bad. And like they were laughing at some of the terms used in there because they just throw out terminology that works in the book because it's set up by hundreds of pages of things that make this language that's a little foreign make sense. And when you put it in the film and just throw out a word like beamquake without even explaining what it is, people are like, what? So it's a bad movie. Don't watch The Dark Tower. I always wanted to watch it because I hoped everybody was wrong because everybody said it was bad. And like I went in hoping that it was just a different interpretation. It could have worked in some other way than the series, and they did something. It's just nothing about it works. Like nothing about it. It's like it relies on you to have read the books and understand them, but at the same time craps all over what they did. So it's just like, yeah, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's bad. It's bad. Don't watch it. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody for watching. Thank you for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.